You're listening to the Unsung Podcast, where we talk about classic albums and decide if they deserve that distinction. And we also talk about some unsung classics in the hopes of bringing them to a new audience. And at the end of it all, we let you decide if we were right or wrong. This is the Unsung Podcast. Hello and welcome to Unsung. This is episode 6, and on this episode we are talking about Mr. Beast by Mogwai. Before we get into it, there's just a couple of things we need to say. First off, on our last episode we spoke about Introducing by DJ Shadow, and you'll be glad to know, or I don't know if Chris will be glad to know, but the public, it would seem, would be glad to know that it got voted into our discography. That's right, DJ Shadow's Introducing is the third album in our discography, and it was actually a very decisive vote. Over 90% of people voted yes for this record to go into our discography, so thank you very much to everybody that voted and who listened. We really appreciate it. Also, very special thanks go out to Tommy Smith and Vicky Henry, because they were our first donators. They were the first people to actually give us money to do this daft thing, which is very, very cool. So thank you so much for that. We really appreciate that. Much love is getting sent your way immediately. But it's also kind of scary because now we're kind of beholden to people. Now we owe people content, which, hey, I guess can't really complain, can we? Anyway, here we go. This is Unsung episode 6, where we talk about Mr. Beast by Mogwai. I'm your host, Mark Fraser, otherwise known as the Curator, and I'm joined by two immaculately turned out gentlemen.
To my right is Chris Cusack, who ever since it's opened, he's actually lived in Taco Bell on Sauchiehall Street and eaten nothing but Taco Bell. I know you're
That's why there's huge queues around the block, because people just want to hang out with me.
Exactly, I know. Have you been to Taco Bell yet?
Absolutely not, but I've walked by it with a kind of condescending, sniffy attitude befitting a man for the West End.
No, that's actually that's why they opened it. They're not even opening it to make money. They're opening it to make us feel better about ourselves when we don't go there.
As if I'll be honest, I'm choking for a Taco Bell, man, but I am not going to stand in a queue so you can walk by. As if I'd be seen queuing that. Taco Bell was, when we went to the States, Taco Bell was only one of the major chains that we didn't actually just tick off our bucket list. You know, it was like,
oh, so you've never been?
You go to like Arby's and Wendy's and all that American shit, and it was like Taco Bell was the only one.
That's because you're in a van and it will make you have diarrhea, so it was a good choice.
Yeah, so I think that's still on the bucket list, albeit it does suit the bucket,
wrong type of bucket.
The bucket, yeah. Yeah, to my left is David Weaver, whose patter is far better than mine tonight, so we'll just leave it at that.
And on this episode we are talking about
Mr. Beast by Mogwai.
Is it Mr. Best?
Hey! Mr. Beast or Mr. Best?
I had to get that in early in case one of you guys had it as well.
Did not have it.
Yeah.
Did not have
That's
it.
because I'm next level.
You're on next level. So your patter's not that bad then.
I just dropped popcorn on the floor.
And you're tuning at the microphone like
yeah,
a
but
fucking reprobate.
I've got to that point in a relationship with the audience where you can just take stuff for granted and start farting in front of them and stuff. We've all been there.
Yeah, so let's start talking about Mr. Beast.
Yeah,
who's going to kick us off?
Quite a lot.
I think
to
it was
get
your
through.
choice, Christopher.
It was my choice, but I think we all agreed we wanted to do Mogwai.
We wanted to do a Mogwai record.
It felt to me to kind of nominate one.
Because I mean, this is not recorded every week. We should put it out there that this was recorded the week after Mogwai played the Hydro.
The biggest show in Scotland, at least, that they've done.
Yeah. It must be their biggest headline show ever, because it's, that's like, it wasn't a full Hydro, but it's like 8,000-9,000 folk, I think.
Yeah, but
they've obviously done festivals, but I can't imagine them ever doing a bigger headline show than that. But I mean, that just shows that a band that started off,
they must have done some pretty huge shows in London though, man, and they did some big ones in Brooklyn for some live filming as well.
But as a sort of defining moment for them, that's they've been going for more than 20 years, and they're just getting bigger and bigger. They've never sort of compromised. They've always just done what the hell they want. I think they're an exceptionally influential and important band in Scotland and the world. You know, in terms of post-rock, they came just after that sort of Slint era, and along with, you know, a good few bands like, you know, Explosions in the Sky, Sigur Rós, and then a couple more down the sort of post-metal-y side. You know, they've constantly sort of redefined themselves and everything. So yeah, we're obviously going to have to talk about a Mogwai record at some point.
I think we'd have to, yeah.
For me, the difficult thing is like choosing what record it is.
Well, since we said, even just in conversation, since we said we were doing this, it's like everybody has a different suggestion. You know, it's kind of hard to pick one. I've got my own reasons for picking this one, which we'll get to. I think it's interesting some of the bands you were naming though, because like Mogwai are, you know, post rock, and people's definitions of post rock kind of vary. Obviously, maybe because it's quite loaded with, I mean, even the fact that when you say it, you associate them with Explosions in the Sky. Maybe we'll get to this. I think Explosions in the Sky are crap.
I completely agree, Christopher. I can't be arsed with them.
They are
They're just the same.
They are the
little bit of
the U2 of post rock.
Exactly.
It's like that Bill Bailey sketch where he
U2.
takes off the delay pedal, and it's just, you know, the edge. His delay pedal.
I don't think they're crap. I think they're overrated.
They have one good song and album.
They have one good album.
Yeah.
I would say.
The one with all the writing on it.
No, I think they've got. I think they've got a good song in each record. That is, as far as I've heard, anyway. You know, so like, but regardless, I think it's interesting with Mogwai because when you say they're post rock, and then I would say that the likes of Silvermount Zion and Godspeed are post rock as well. You know, yet they're quite markedly different, especially when you go into stuff like rave tapes and
like post hardcore, innit? Like there's so many different types of band in post hardcore.
Yeah, I kind of feel though that like in post rock, like post rock's got a sort of overarching sort of alternative vibe to it anyway. You know, there's not really a particularly poppy, accessible post rock band. Although a few folk have recently, you know, tried to go that way. Mogwai, for me, are like the tabloid end of post rock, and I think Godspeed are like the broadsheet end of post rock. But I would say that Mogwai are the, you know, the eye paper. You know, the good end tabloid. Like,
yeah.
You know, it's like because there's everything down that scale, right down to like pretty crappy sort of just, again, effects pedal driven pish, just music without vocals that's just chord changes, and there's a hell of a lot of that. And Mogwai have done really, really well to get through. There are caveats to this, but they've done really well to get through their career and constantly innovate and keep their heads above the water in that sense, and not be just drowned by just this deluge of fucking boring formulaic post-rock bands. I think the broadsheet end of the spectrum, which is probably more the Godspeed, the Canadian stuff, and the La Bradford, like, that stuff's far more nuanced and a bit more highbrow and a bit... I don't...
Yeah, but not... I mean, you say that, but like Mogwai, like you go in My Father, My King, or, you know...
Oh, no.
A lot of the earlier records that a lot of people maybe think are the ones that define Mogwai, you know, they're the ones that are, you know, have got the 20-minute tracks.
You're totally right.
Lots of subtlety. And
but they are more prone to falling into the riff. I mean, to relying on the riff. And I think that's something with the likes of... I mean, we're getting maybe ahead of it because we've not even really introduced the album, but one thing I think about them is that they are more prone in a bind. Whereas the song going, we'll redouble the riff, we'll add a distortion, we'll add another layer of distortion. And I think sometimes... probably in their weaker moments they've resorted to that, and yet they have so much more to bring to the table in their more kind of nuanced, subdued parts, which is where I think they're really fucking excellent. Yeah. Yet they do sometimes get out of that trap of here's just a big chunky riff because they know it'll work live and they know it'll be a killer song, and you know it's like we can just. That's the thing about Mogwai that it's always been like a slight nag to me, and that to me that sort of also is the thing that bands like Godspeed and that in one hand had over them, in the sense that they were able to add the weight without just adding the layers of distortion and the extra, you know, the chunky power chord. But at the same time, Mogwai, by doing that, have probably reached a far bigger audience, or at least a more a slightly more crossover like, audience.
You compare Mogwai and Godspeed there, both bands that I've seen this year separately and really enjoyed. But 3 years ago, I saw both of them at Primavera, and it was Godspeed followed by Mogwai. And I fucking love Godspeed, but it was like the third night of Primavera, and me and my pal just sort of sat down and we watched Godspeed, and we were like, this is amazing, but holy fuck, I could do a nap. And we just like, you know, because it's in this big open space, and like I was really, really enjoying it, but it didn't like lift me up or anything. We just sort of sat and watched it and let it sort of flow. And then 20-minute changeover, and then Mogwai got up, and like they did that post-rock heavy thing, but they did it in fucking 4.5 minute chunks.
Well, that's the thing.
And like they had that fucking power. They played for an hour and a half, and like it's one of the best things I've ever seen live. And
that's kind of what I mean about the tabloid thing, though. They're much more bite-sized, and there's much more of a kind of like, let's condense this, let's make it a little bit more accessible. And in some ways, that's really great, and it's also a great way to bring you into that genre.
Yeah.
But I do also feel that in terms of like the subtlety and the complexity of it, bands like Godspeed have tried to avoid falling back on, you know, certain devices,
absolutely.
you know.
But if that's what defines Mogwai as a band, that sort of being able to take alternative, like subtle music and put it into bite-sized chunks, then this for me is the record that defines that.
I would say that's this is an interesting record for me, because that seems to be the goal of this record, is making it as streamlined as possible without losing any of the power of what they do. This is like, of all the things I've heard, and admittedly I've not heard a lot by them, this is the most songy record, if that makes sense.
Oh, if Alan McGee likes it, you know you're onto something. Yeah, I mean this
He's the guy that discovered Oasis.
Yeah,
I believe he's probably that guy, and I'm sure he's mentioned it to a couple of people.
You know,
Somewhere in Glasgow, I think.
right.
I don't know.
I heard about this.
Broadcast. It was in broadcast.
Best small venue in the UK.
Oh, 1994.
No, I think you're right. Like this
The
is
Transmit Festival, that's where they found them.
It was day 3. So basically, I agree, and that's kind of why I picked this album, is because it nails that brevity. I love Mogwai. Let's not make any bones about that. I'm just trying to be a bit more thorough in my analysis of that, and be a bit more embracing of what I see as some faults as well. I mean, I'm saying that. I mean, they've achieved a lot, and they've been going for a long time. That's no small feat. But this is the album for me where they got the right blend, the right amount of different elements, the gush, you know, the prettiness, the heaviness, the power, the kind of weirdness, the bits of vocals, I think, as well. Like, this album has 3 tracks vocals on it, and it's, for me, just the right amount to mix it up.
I wasn't ready for them at all.
Yeah, like, and Hawk is Howling after it had none. It was the first one they did with 0 vocals, and it's, I think they just got a really great blend of ingredients. And whilst there are probably tracks on their other albums that individually would make, if you could assemble an album from all their other records, it would be better. But this is a great snapshot of a band. It's also, I think as well, it's worth mentioning, this album is different in terms of production. It's got much more of that kind of saturated, powerful, you know, if you could see the waveforms, I'm sure these are a lot more rectangular as opposed to the kind of previous ones, you know. And I think that plays a part in the kind of its ability to cross over and to bring people into it. Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it, Mark, because you are the least skilled in Mogwai. I mean, Dave, have been pretty immersed in them for a while, but...
The only records I'd heard before this were Young Team, which I thought were good because, like Herod, is awesome, and the Atomic soundtrack, which is not, Mogwai, but it's not Mogwai. It's the quieter Mogwai, which I liked. I loved that. I listened to this record, and as soon as it finished, I hit play again, and I haven't done that with a record for a number of years. Yeah, legitimately. I'm not just saying that to make this more of a sort of banner episode, but legitimately, I really want to hear that again.
Aye.
And I struggle with post-rock sometimes because it goes on a bit too long.
Yeah, and it's
Emotions in the Sky struggle with post-rock sometimes.
Yeah, evidently so, aye. I've tried to get into them too, but no, like this for me, don't know. It's just everything I imagined that Mogwai were when people explained what Mogwai were like to me and how important they were.
Well, I remember like when I first happened upon Mogwai, it was when I was like 13 or 14, reading magazines, going back to Kerrang, and like seeing 5K reviews.
That's like a running theme.
Yeah. I mean, it's a big part of my musical upbringing, me as a teenager reading Kerrang. But, you know, you'd always see 5K reviews of Mogwai live, and loud and quiet and loud as fuck was always the thing that stood out. And I remember seeing the photo of like Stuart and his Telecaster with a little Scottish flag and just thinking, oh, I need to go out and hear that band. And it was at the time when I probably couldn't even go and just download a track by them because there weren't enough people sharing it, and they were like 25 minutes long, so it would have taken 4 hours to download on Napster. So it was like I actually had no idea what Mogwai sounded like for about a year, and after I knew who they were.
Dial-up MP3s, man. Oh,
yeah, exactly. It was a fucking nightmare. Because like, you know, that was back when they were doing, you know, Come On Die Young and stuff like that.
By the way,
then
Come and Die Young was the other one. That was
Come and Die Young
that was
is the
the two I
one
was trying to
that
decide
I think a
between.
lot of people will think, why are you not doing that record?
Mm.
Because that's their sort of earlier defining work.
I actually don't agree. I think a lot of people were surprised that we weren't doing Young Team.
Yeah, I've kind of
Young Team is my choice because it's the only reason I'd heard that record is because I'd heard that it was the one.
It's like fresh,
not,
but it's
though.
not. It's a sound of a band just starting. You know, it's the sound of a young band.
Yeah.
Whereas I think they've progressed and they have improved, and that's to their credit. I mean, I know it's very nostalgic and very sentimentally relevant to a lot of people, but I even for the style that it is, I think Come and Die Young is a more accomplished version of Young Team. And then the stuff beyond that, where they started to add in synths and they started to get a bit more into sequencing and stuff like that, is a development again. But yeah, I mean, Young Team's a lovely album, especially tracks like Summer. I think that's a great bit of music. But yeah, this has created quite a lot of disagreement, even just in conversation, like I said.
if I totally made this up, but for some reason I believe that Take Me Somewhere Nice, the track Take Me Somewhere Nice, that's on Come Die Young, I think, was in Sex and the City.
I thought that was in Young Team, but
Oh, maybe it's on Young Team. I can't remember. I'm like riffing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was in Sex and the City, like the TV program. They put that
it's just
in.
another Bernstein Bears.
Maybe I've totally made that up.
Yeah,
I must read when.
But like,
it was probably on Hollyoaks.
but for me, like,
Imagine that.
Mogwai started becoming quite
take me down there.
Like-
Take me somewhere nice.
like they've obviously embraced it lately, but like they started becoming a sort of soundtrack band, and
they are, aren't they? I mean,
they're
that's
a
kind
very soundtrack band,
Yeah.
and like a lot of Mr. Beast was used. Like for fuck's sake, I think Auto Rock is must be one of the most like used documentary, songs of all time.
BBC
I think-
like special report.
Yeah, exactly. I think Top Gear used it a bunch of times, just because to make something
So-
dramatic. You want to make something dramatic, you put Auto Rock in.
This probably won't ingratiate me at the band, but I guess that's not the point of this podcast. But actually, Mogwai are an obvious band to want to soundtrack things.
Mm-hmm.
When they have soundtrack things, I don't think the material has been as strong as when they've been writing for the music and has retrospectively fitted a bit of film. So, if you take a song that is a piece of work that they've crafted and then apply it to a bit of film, or maybe edit a version and apply it to a bit of film, musically it's always been stronger, I feel, than when with the likes of Atomic, or is it Le Revenant?
I thought Le Revenant was fucking outstanding.
It's
man.
really nice, man, but
I thought that worked perfectly. Like,
it does. No, it does. It suits the purpose. What I mean is, when you then hear the record on its own as a standalone record,
yeah.
it musically, it's very much a soundtrack. It
Yeah,
doesn't.
but that's what it was.
I know that.
Like they're a victim of their own success in that they like write a piece of music for
Yeah, you're
film,
right. And then people,
and then everybody goes, "Oh, that's a Mogwai record. Let's take it," and it gets a fucking say award.
You're probably right there. That's a fair point. It's just I'm thinking more from the perspective of Mark being introduced to them. His first two reference points were, Young Team and Atomic, and Atomic is not representative of Mogwai to me. It's much more. I don't say pedestrian sounds. It's not a bad record.
fits
but it's not a good
it
record.
fits
what
It's
it's-
their
I've
catalogue.
not seen the film, and I've only heard that record, and
It works
you
well
like it a lot.
to the footage, but on its own, it doesn't stand up as well. And I take on board that's not what it is. But they do have stuff on their albums which haven't been written for footage, but would lend themselves spectacularly well to that. And I think. No, I don't know what I think.
Should we drop it? Someone needs to drop the C-bomb and say cinematic. They create cinematic
Yeah, I mean,
music.
they kind of effortlessly create things that conjure images. I mean, this record possibly less so than others because it's got a lot. It's a lot more compact. Certainly, stuff like Come and Die Young is quite sprawling in places, and
Yeah,
I think Hawk is Howling has some really like big, expansive, beautiful bits in it as well. This one feels a lot more condensed. There are moments where it as Dave was saying, Auto Rock is a good example. I think there's almost like ballad post rock in this though, with like Friend of the Night.
Friend of the Night, I think, is my favourite Mogwai song.
Yeah, it's a beautiful song. I really want to get Richard Marx to sing over it.
Not Chris Rea, no.
Not Chris Rea. Maybe Chris Isaac.
I love Chris.
That'd be pretty lush. But it's almost like post-rock ballad.
Yeah.
As opposed to just post-rock. So it's much more succinct than it's it's verse, chorus.
But it still builds and it builds and it builds. But it does it.
Yeah. See the track before it, Team Handed.
Yeah.
I love Team Handed every bit as much as I love Friend of the Night. It's a more understated version, the kind of companion piece of Friend of the Night.
Yeah, definitely.
I think the two are sort of quite, they're kind of cousins, if you know what I mean, musically speaking. I think they're really strong. I think that's one of the advantages of the album. Like it's like Acid Food as well. It's completely different to was it Glasgow Megasnake?
Glasgow Megasnake.
Completely different. Yeah, it's brilliant, and the album is brilliantly arranged. The pace of the album.
Yeah,
it
definitely.
means that when these songs come on, they're all getting a fair hearing because you're not tired. You're not overly burned out by like a sprawling kind of like Christmas steps type thing, or you're not or Mogwai. If you're saying they do as good as they are. They can sometimes fatigue you as a listener, and I think this album avoids any of the songs really suffering too much from fatigue, because just as you're getting fatigued by volume, they drop it down, and just as you're getting fatigued by it being a little bit too understated, they lifted it back up. And it's just a really excellent arrangement of an album. It flows really well, and it allows the music to really be, I don't know, appreciate it. It's got you give it a more generous ear when you're listening to each of the songs in that sense.
Hi folks, sorry to interrupt the show. This is Chris, I'll try and make it quick. It's my turn this week to canvass for donations. We would love to be able to cover critical podcasting costs like web hosting, taxi fares to the studio in Glasgow, chocolate fingers and bottles of red wine, because the less time Dave Weaver has to spend turning tricks, the more time he can spend researching music he's talking about. Clearly, we all stand to benefit from that. So please feel free to just jump across to unsungpod.net. There should be a donation button there, and any amount is very much appreciated. We're not looking to buy solid gold tracksuits anytime soon. Thanks for your time. Back to the show.
I think we definitely need to have a Mogwai record in this list.
Has to be one.
And then it's this one or it's another one. And like in terms of the records that came after, I think they all kind of felt like they were trying to recapture this a little bit. Different parts. And they definitely went off on different bits. Like Mr. Beast, I felt they tried to go a bit more in terms of like the subtlety, and like songs like I'm Gonna Blow Up Your School and Jim Morrison. They took that sort of earlier exploratory vibe a bit more, and then on hardcore it was more structured, and then on rave tapes it was, certainly with Remurdered, they were just like, we could make a fucking club track.
Yeah, well, that's kind of interesting, because I think one of the production on this, I can't tell if the production lent itself to the new format of brevity, or if the brevity was a product of when they were working these down in the studio. They were like, oh, this sounds really thick, we should just shorten it and make it really, to the point. But the two factors combined really well, and I think other ones have combined, but maybe not to the same effect.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean. Like Rave Tapes has got a few tracks in it that are...
Yeah, I really like Rave Tapes.
Sort of...
I felt like, although I always felt slightly cheated by Rave Tapes, because they released Remurdered first, and it was called Rave Tapes. I was like, fuck, are they going to do an album of fucking bangers here? Like techno bangers. And then that was the only track on it that sounded like that.
That vibe, yeah.
And it's still a really fucking good Mogwai record, but it sort of stands out on its own, and it's like, it's Rave Tapes, it is what it is. Whereas this one, I always go back to it and it's like, this is Mogwai.
I think Hardcore Will Never Die is one of the top ones for me. I think of their catalogue, it's it's maybe second or third in relation to this. And Come On Die
enough, Rano Pano off Hardcore Will Never Die is such a I'm just looking at you, and I remember listening to that track when we were in the van driving across
and
that massive bridge in the south of France.
yeah, and
it's like that cinematic. The first time I ever heard that track, I was in the back of a car in LA, and we were driving downtown in LA, and there was like 7 of us packed in the back of a car going to some gig. And I was like, yeah, pretty much. The guy was like, "Oh, I've got the new Mogwai song," and he put that on, and I was like, "Fucking hell!" That one track stands out for me on Hardcore Will Never Die, even though I know there's fucking great
well,
songs
they've got
on
Mexican
it, like
Grand Prix in that as well, which is a total outlier as well. Like,
little fact: I'm in the video for Mexican Grand Prix.
Good for you, you smug bastard.
No, but it's because me and my friend Matthew were really hungover. We'd been in the flat, and we went down.
Like you,
we went down back in our old flat in Grant Street. We went, remember, the Fat Tomato on
yeah, absolutely,
St George's Road, yeah. And standing outside the Fat Tomato, and a guy with a camera comes up. He's like, "Oh, can we just take like a quick 3-second video of you?" We're like,
you two steamers.
We're like, "Whoa, I haven't really been to bed yet."
They're right next to the Carnarvon.
And we're like, "Oh yeah, what's it for?" He's like, "Oh, we're making a music video, and we're just taking like snapshots of like hundreds of people all the way on like a tour around Glasgow." And it turned out it was for Mexican Grand Prix. So if you pause like a minute and a half into Mexican Grand Prix, you can see my exceptionally hungover face just going, ugh. But anyway, that's a really good song off the record we're not talking about.
Yeah. No, but I think it does highlight that they have some exceptional music scattered across albums. And I don't think necessarily, other than this and maybe for me in Come and Die Young, they've managed to get an album that captures the consistency and the vibe, or perhaps it's just the way the albums are arranged. It doesn't flow as well, because the albums, you can listen to them and end up liking every tune. It's just for whatever reason you can't get through them as fluently and as effortlessly as Mr. Beast. It just, as you said, you played it straight away. It's not a fatiguing album. It's a really strong, flowing, well constructed record, and I think that's why it popped into my head. Come and Die Young's a totally different proposition. It's much more relaxed, and it's much more, I don't even know what to say, spacious. But again, a different side of the band, but I absolutely love it. For the regular, see, Mr. Beast, I bought my copy, the copy I still have, thankfully, when I was in Genoa. I went on a trip, and it was the day it came out, and I spent the day going around Genoa until I could find a record shop that actually sold it. But yeah, I've always had that. So it's weird. They're a band that you attach things to, you attach memories to.
Yeah, that's it.
Partly because of the nature of the music, and it's so cinematic, and you do end up taking loads of photos in your mind as you're listening to it. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people probably, without even realising it, and maybe I'm guilty of this as I say it, judge the albums based on the experiences that we're having with those albums, so I personally...
Yeah, but there's a lot of experiences you have listening to music and you don't remember what music you listen to.
That's true. But
this sticks with you.
Yeah, this does tend to kind of bring those things together in that way. And Mogwai have got a knack of doing that. This really nails it, I think. There's loads of like nice little touches on it as well. I think having the guy from Envy doing the spoken word on it is just a nice touch. It just kind of mellows it out a bit, and it's not Aidan Moffat, so that's a plus. I mean, it's just really I don't know, it just seems like they really put a lot of thought in it before they started. They really had a really good idea what they wanted.
Because they're quite prolific. Like, they release an album every year and a half, basically. Whether it's like their own studio record or a soundtrack album. And to me, that's like, they might not necessarily, I don't know what I'm quite trying to say. It's like, it's not a special album. It's just the next Mogwai record. But when this one came out, there'd been a bit of a gap, and it was like, fuck, we're going to be a new band now. It's going to be like, we're going to tighten everyone up.
Do you know where Rock Action comes from?
Oh fuck yeah, I do. What is it?
I thought that was as cool as shit. It was the guy from the Stooges, the drummer from the Stooges, changed his name to Rock Action.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. I just thought it was a cool phrase.
Yeah.
I was like, fuck, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I think for me, it's a one. It's not au fait with Mogwai. This record, it just feels like a band that have got their shit together. Even as someone that doesn't know that much about the band, it feels complete. You know what I mean? And a lot of bands I love can go whole careers and never really create a record that feels like that. I don't know if it's the same for Mogwai, but
you could maybe get to know someone. It'd be interesting to see after you've invested a bit more time in some of their other albums, is to ask somebody, see as like a fingerprint of your personality. Pick 10 tracks, any 10 tracks, and on a compilation tape, and classify personalities based on like what Mogwai record they put together. I'd love to hear the bands, like see like Barry and Stuart.
Well, they've already done it
Like
with their
a put-
central belters. That's another thing they're really fucking good at is song names, album names.
I was going to talk
Like,
about
they're
that.
so
The
good.
song names are
And like for a George
George Square Thatcher Death Party.
Yeah, absolute belter. And for a Glasgow band to call their best of central belters,
Yeah.
absolutely fucking brilliant. Like no
Two
fucks
Rage into
given.
Cheers. That's a fucking quality name. You said Hugh to Remurdered. They've got one called Hugh Dallas, and one they're
Yeah.
Crossing the Road material. It's a pretty good patter. Stop coming to my house. That's such a fucking random thing. Yeah, letters to the Metro. Nah, the patter's quality, man. They've not overplayed the Scottish thing, but they've played it just right.
Mm-hmm.
If you know what I mean, it's pretty cool. But Central Belters though, I'd love to hear the individual compilations of their best ones. You know what I mean? It'd be
Well,
really
as you say that, funnily enough, I don't know if anybody else out there does this, but I really like making playlists
I've never noticed that
on
about you.
Spotify or anything.
I've heard this. Yeah, I've heard the story.
And so I've got like a big massive list of best ofs in my head. I make little compilation best of albums for like my favourite bands.
Like
And,
DJ Weaver and name.
that includes
And nature.
exactly. So like I've got best of Russian Circles. I've got best of Rammstein.
You should maybe
Got
have
best
checked
of
this.
Radiohead, best of Nine Inch Nails, best of blah blah blah, and I've got a best of Mogwai. So I've got 21 songs on there. So it'd be interesting. Why don't you two guys go away and make your best 21 Mogwai
I think
songs?
21's excessive. That's the
take me a
point. I'd
while.
love to see people work within the constraints of 10.
I'm just going to count how many I've got from this record. You discuss amongst yourselves.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because to their credit, and I'm maybe being a bit critical or coming across a bit critical about the kind of reliance on distortion and some of their stuff, but that is partly why they got into Kerrang. And getting into Kerrang, whether I like it or not as a music snob, that was where I first saw them properly. I'd seen them in NME, but NME's shit and I don't believe anything they say. So seeing them in Kerrang, it's like, oh man, this band's got crossover, and then you go and hear it and you're like, this is fantastic. And there's a lot of people wouldn't have got into Mogwai if they weren't in Kerrang. Godspeed weren't in Kerrang. It's like they did have an ability to straddle different audiences in a way that other bands didn't, and that's not only helped them, but it's helped that entire genre to some extent, and is probably why they're so prominent, because they have managed to keep it fresh by spreading a wide base to begin with that allowed them to pick and choose from bit to bit, and nothing sounded too inconsistent with their previous output. But as a result, picking like your 10 best Mogwai tunes would be pretty
All right, so
dramatic.
I mean, I made this in 2015. Well, that was the last time it was updated. And I can confirm, so I've got 3 tracks from Young Team, and I try and keep them like precise, but with some bands it's difficult because they've got loads of records. 3 tracks from Young Team, 2 from Rock Action, 2 from Rave Tapes. Got My Father, My King.
It's a long playlist.
I know. Got 3 tracks from the Les Rovenel soundtrack, 3 from The Hawk is Howling, 2 from Hardcore Will Never Die, 2 from Come On Die Young, and I've got 4 from Mr. Beast.
Jackpot.
So it's the album that I've got most tracks from.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how people vote in this one. I mean, a yes or no is almost a tight vote because people aren't saying it's a bad album, but I think to make it clear, is it, in your opinion, their best album?
Yeah, is this the album that represents Mogwai? Basically, I guess the
And there's a
question
very good
last.
chance that
Is it their defining record?
these guys could even be the first band that we end up coming back to for a second record, possibly Come On Die Young, or unless they do something wonderful.
Or anything.
Yeah, because they have so much to choose from, and it's so contentious as to what is the best representation of them. By the way, like I think that their rarities and the EPs and stuff are fantastic. Like some,
there's some
like
amazing
the Stanley
stuff.
Kubrick tune is just brilliant, and Star Wars as well, man. It's just there's a lot of stuff like off the radar as well. That's excellent. So yeah, that's kind of a tough decision. So it's probably going to be confusing to try and vote on it. Is this their best album? You know, is this the definitive Mogwai record? Albeit, we're all reluctant to try and pigeonhole them because they've done so well at avoiding that. But if you had to just try and persuade someone to listen to Mogwai, what album would you give them? Is it this one? Maybe that's the best criteria.
Well, it's made me want to listen to them more, and I guess that's
It's a good sign.
It's probably a good
Yeah.
sign. Yeah. So are we unanimous in this one then?
I think that's pretty safe to say. It's a really
For me, this is the Mogwai album. If you had to take one Mogwai album to a desert island, this would be it for me.
If we end up back here in like 18 months' time, like talking about Come On Die Young or something else even, then I won't be upset, you know, because there is plenty to enthuse about. But I think this one seems to be the one.
Okay, well, I think that settles it then.
And if Alan McGee says so, then it's gospel.
Has to be. He found some band in some venue in Glasgow, I heard once, but
I've
Yeah,
not
you
heard
found the
anything
Verve
like
in
that.
box.
Alan-
Alan probably wouldn't mention that though, to be fair to him, and neither would the venue.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing you just, you know,
just, it happens all the time.
quietly proud
Yeah.
about it. You don't really trumpet it or put a sign on the outside of your venue about it.
So go vote. Go to our Facebook page and vote if you want this album to be the representation of Mogwai that goes into our discography. And if you don't, we might come back and talk about another one. But
Or maybe Too Bad, name Mogwai, and
Aye,
we'll tell
or
them.
that
We'll be
too.
like, hey, by the way,
You fucked it,
here's
guys.
all the names of the folk online that voted no. Here's their addresses. And then you can say, stop coming to my house, Mogwai. Stop pelting my windows with
blow up
eggs.
your
That's
school.
probably a Mogwai track. Stop kicking my granny. That's probably a Mogwai track. They've got to all these before me.
so yeah, go and vote. So what is next, Chris?
I believe the next record is Ease by Joanna Newsom.
So that's going to be an interesting conversation.
I'm gonna work hard to keep it short. Unlike she did.
That's what I was going to say. You stole my joke. Damn it. Okay, well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I just want to remind everybody to like and share and subscribe and do all the cool shit. Drop us a rating and review on iTunes. We'd really appreciate that because that helps people see this podcast, and that's what we're here for. We're all here about the money. That's the only reason we're here.
$.
Dollar bills, y'all. Cheers, guys.